New Forest believes that new investment models in forestry and land use must really channel finance into strategies that are going to protect and restore ecosystems, really improve this management of working lands and provide eventually more sustainable materials for the future circular bioeconomy.
Welcome to The Greener Way. I'm your host, Rose Mary Petrass, Senior Journalist at FS Sustainability. We are recording on Gadigal land and we pay our respects to traditional custodians of country and elders past, present and emerging. Today, we sit down for a chat with Sarah Clawson, Global Head of Investor Relations at New Forest, an international investment manager of nature-based real assets and natural capital strategies. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself, tell us about your role, and tell us about what New Forest is all about.
Sure, it's great to be here with you today. So, Sarah Clawson, the Global Head of Investor Relations. I've been with New Forest for about 12 years. My background is in the responsible investment world, where I worked for a number of years in Europe before moving to Sydney, Australia, where we're headquartered. So my team is responsible for raising capital for our various strategies, as well as providing timely and transparent client servicing for approximately 50 clients that we have worldwide. Mm-hmm. And so what is New Forest all about? We are all about sustainable landscape management. So we're an investment management business. We invest capital into sustainable land use. We have about 11 billion in Aussie dollar terms in assets under management, and that's over 1.3 million hectares of land that we manage in various regions where we operate. We're currently in Australia and New Zealand, the United States, Southeast Asia, as well as Africa. And just as we talk about forestry, it's important to note that forests are the home to most of the world's biodiversity. They store more carbon than is in the atmosphere, and they're also supporting the livelihoods of billions of people around the world. But much of the issues we're having around deforestation, land degradation, poor agricultural practices, these are all contributing to some of our biggest challenges around climate change and biodiversity loss. So to address these challenges, New Forest believes that new investment models in forestry and land use must really channel finance into strategies that are going to protect and restore ecosystems, really improve this management of working lands and provide eventually more sustainable materials for the future circular bioeconomy.
So when we're talking about investing in natural capital, we're seeing quite a rise in interest in forestry investments. Can you explain why there's growing interest and what exactly it all means?
Sure. Forestry investment has really grown steadily over the past 35 years or so to become a core part of many institutional investment portfolios today. So this has traditionally been seen as an allocation to private real assets or alternative assets. And forestry provides an exposure to a wide range of underlying markets. This can be for construction timber, it can be for pulp and paper, furniture, energy, rural property values. And over the last 35 years, as this has been evolving, some of the key themes of this evolution in forestry include a really important shift of wood supply that used to come from intensive clearing of natural forests to what is now sustainable harvesting of timber plantations instead.
Right.
There's a rise of Asian demand for timber and wood fiber. This is also going to occur in Africa. And a real rise of sustainability and climate mitigation opportunities. So most institutional forestry investment to date has been in the United States, and the forestry sector operates now in all regions of the world: Australia, New Zealand, Europe, South America, Asia, Africa. And conventional forestry has a substantial track record of providing low volatility returns and portfolio diversification benefits. More recently, we're seeing this exposure to emerging commercial opportunities in climate change solutions, conservation finance, circular bioeconomy transition. And so that's really part of what's driving this rising investor interest in forestry.
And when it comes to generating returns while adhering to an ESG investment approach, what's New Forest's strategy there?
So we've always had this combined focus of delivering core returns to investors and also exposing them to new markets that are aligned with this low carbon future and really contributing to nature restoration and community benefits. So to do that, we really need to monitor, track, and report on both environmental and social risks and opportunities. We currently do this for over 80 asset metrics, which are all linked to impact in our portfolios. These are based off of the 6 capitals like natural capital, social capital, human capital, etc. And sustainability is such a key driver of the forestry asset class because this involves managing risks that are related to impacts of global climate change, the loss of nature, and things that are linked to social injustice and inequality as well. So one area to highlight with respect to impact here is an innovative structure we've set up for our fund in Africa. We decided to link New Forest performance fees directly to 4 specific impact targets. 2 are environmental targets, climate, biodiversity focused. 2 are social targets focused on gender and also community and livelihoods. So it really shows we think these are achievable, and it's also really important to have both the environmental and the social aspects included.
Sustainable landscape management. Let's talk about that. How does that work? What is the emerging thought leadership on best practice in this area?
So sustainable landscape management is about optionality, and it's about what is the highest and best use of the land. So this is a really important concept that good managers really integrate into their strategies. So as we all wrestle with this transition to sustainability, competition among various land uses will really intensify. There's timber, there's agriculture, there's carbon, there's biodiversity, there's water rights, there's wind farms, there's solar farms. All of this really needs to be accommodated in the best way possible. To do that, we need really sophisticated geospatial optimization modeling. So looking at the land and deciding what is the best allocation of that land on an even more granular scale. And you can think about this similar to investing in types of infrastructure like airports. So there's multiple forms of option value and revenue coming in, parking, shopping malls, and these are all used to increase asset value and income. In land use, these forms of option value are harder to optimize sometimes because they compete. You think about the competition between food and fiber, and there's also going to be a regulatory overlay that needs to be brought into play here. So it's important to look at this as an opportunity for investors, and broader consideration of forestry and agriculture and nature conservation that all comes together into a single high sustainability asset class, breaks down these silos, creates flexibility, optionality, revenue streams. And that's really what we're talking about when we say this natural capital asset class, providing these new opportunities to deploy capital and frankly generate excellent risk-adjusted returns as well.
I believe you recently opened your new office in Africa, correct?
Yes, that's right. We have. We opened an office in Africa not so long ago. And I was actually just there for a 10-day roadshow where momentum is really increasing. We're seeing interest from African investors as well as many European investors. I met at a conference there last week.
Interesting.
And they're attracted to the commercial returns and the strong impact angle that we're providing on our African strategy.
So you're seeing quite a kind of global expansion. I'm interested about the different projects you have across Australia, New Zealand, Asia, the US, and Africa. Also the different opportunities and maybe the challenges that you see between these regions.
Yeah, sure. So maybe if we just finish on Africa for a moment, we've launched our African Forestry Impact Platform. That's a perpetual capital vehicle, and that has a mandate to invest across the forest landscape in plantation forestry and processing assets in sub-Saharan Africa. It is challenging, but it is something that we believe being there for the longer term in this perpetual vehicle will really help us be successful in that. And tying that back to impact around environmental and social outcomes is really
Mm-hmm.
quite important. We've raised $200 million US dollars from 3 investors there, and we have a target of $500 million to raise over the next few years.
Amazing.
In Australia and New Zealand, our strategy continues to be a very core forestry investment fund with a portion investing in agriculture and related infrastructure. So Australia and New Zealand is where our stronghold is. We've been investing here when we set up in 2005, so almost 20 years now. We focus on landscapes and land use transition through time. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it comes back to what is that highest and best use of the land over the life of the fund. We're in our fourth round fund at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The maturation of the carbon market and the rising carbon offset prices will likely continue to play a role in that strategy, as well as the emerging bioeconomy. But this greater focus on natural capital solutions by institutional investors as they want to get to net zero is really also driving interest in that strategy. And
Mm-hmm.
more Australian superannuation funds, large insurance companies, they're really coming to this strategy now. Some have been investing for several years, such as UniSuper, but there's others who are coming on board with our fourth round fund. We had a 450 million close in December last year, and
Mm-hmm.
we're well on our way to raising our additional 200 million or so for that fund this year.
And you mentioned carbon credits there. How are these incorporated into your investment approach? And also, how do you ensure that best practice and integrity are safeguarded?
Yeah, that's quite important. So New Forest is familiar with both the compliance carbon markets and the voluntary carbon markets. And
Mm-hmm.
so in both instances, it's critical to respect the supply side integrity, so the transparency and validity of the carbon project that we create, as well as the demand side integrity. That means in the voluntary markets, who are we selling our carbon credits to?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the rise of forestry as an asset class is really linked to this monetization of carbon. Forests offer large carbon sinks and
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for investors to commit to strategies with this very strong climate mitigation angle. Trees store carbon. This is proven low cost technology for removing greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're also looking to replace carbon intensive steel and concrete in building construction with timber. So, interestingly, in my experience, more recently, but certainly over the last 10 or 12 years or so, not all investors have the same view of how they would like to use or monetize or benefit from carbon credits.
Mm-hmm.
Many want to purchase them to use internally to offset other parts of their portfolios. But others are very happy to have the managers such as New Forest manage those carbon credit sales and provide additional uplift in returns back to the investors.
Mm-hmm.
So I can provide you with some examples of how carbon credits are incorporated into our business. So for example, in our Australia New Zealand funds, we target carbon sequestration products from forest and soil carbon projects on fund-owned land.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that we can sell these to domestic regulated and international voluntary markets. We generate and sell ACUs and NZUs, so the Australian and New Zealand units of carbon. We also invest in agriculture, and that provides additional optionality in terms of this highest and best land use.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the land could be converted to plantation forestry or remain as an agriculture investment, and that can
Mm-hmm.
help address climate change through regenerative practices and sequestering more carbon in soils. Now, if we switch over to our US strategy, that's really focused on acquiring and managing existing forestry in specific regions across the US to earn offsets through this very well established California offset market. So, the California greenhouse gas emissions trading system is one of the world's largest regulatory carbon markets, total offset market value forecast at about 10 billion US through 2030. So our US strategy is quite focused on that carbon uplift that will provide in investing in forestry in that region in North America. And in Southeast Asia and Africa, we'll include carbon offset projects to provide access to carbon credits, which can be sold into the voluntary markets.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be done through establishment of commercial forests, which also have access to timber markets, on land where carbon sequestration can also be monetized through investment in avoided deforestation projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, the carbon play, if you will, for us is also about optionality. It's about additional revenue streams when investing in this asset class.
And Indigenous engagement is so important when it comes to investing in natural capital. So tell us about your First Nations engagement policy and philosophy.
So New Forest works with Indigenous people in all the regions where we operate, and this is obviously a very critical element of investing in land. So, for example, we've worked with the iwi people from the Maori Society in New Zealand. In Australia, we're now ensuring our assets are covered by a reconciliation action plan, which aims to deliver tangible and really substantive benefits for First Nations people and increase cultural safety in the workplace. In Southeast Asia, we've worked with a number of local communities to provide opportunities to advance quality of jobs, livelihoods. We do this through worker training, improved health and safety management, supply chain engagement. And this community angle really offers opportunities for shared prosperity that can be through joint ventures or benefit sharing models. One of these is through what we call an outgrower scheme. So we create opportunities by establishing a voluntary outgrower scheme for neighboring communities where we're going to be investing on degraded or underutilized land. And that ensures local business development and really building capacity in that region with local communities. We've done this in Laos, for example, most recently, and optimizing that climate and biodiversity value through commercial reforestation of these lands on a small outgrower scheme scale. In Africa, we're already engaged with over 80 villages across our current assets. We have assets in Uganda, Mozambique, and Tanzania. And again, that's the aim of scaling positive community impacts, increasing earnings for local communities in income as well. And lastly, in the United States, we have engaged with several Native American tribes and tribal organizations. So this has resulted in really significant income back to tribes through the sale of carbon credits in the regulated California carbon market. And one specific example, New Forest has worked with the Yurok tribe for over a decade. They're one of the largest tribes in California. And we collaborated with them and the Trust for Public Land to return over 2,000 acres of culturally and ecologically important land to the tribe in perpetuity. So the land is an important part of the watershed that provides drinking water and supports wildlife habitat. So New Forest, by doing this, really supports the tribe's efforts to reclaim their ancestral territory. And that's just one example of how we collaborate with Native communities.
I think we have time for one more question today. If you can say in under a minute, what is next for New Forest? Is there any areas of focus that will be emerging in the next few years?
Next for New Forest is to continue to build out where we're currently operating. A large focus will be on Africa in the coming years, as well as the US, where we have established these long-term capital vehicles. And I think by doing so, we're aligning ourselves with the needs of institutional investors in this asset class, and also proving that we're going to be in this sustainable landscape management business for a very long time to come.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm Rose Mary Petrass, and that's a wrap for today. Tune in next week to hear all about ESG and sustainability jobs in 2024, salaries, career tips, and more with Simon Gavalda of Kaizen Recruitment.
The Greenaway podcast is a product of FS Sustainability, a show about people, the planet, and investing in our collective future. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The Greenaway podcast gives listeners access to information and educational content provided by discussing numerous financial sustainable options and our featured guests. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of The Greener Way are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.